Hey everyone. So I am Dr. Nithin Natwa. I'm a board certified sports medicine physician. I'm starting to get into long form content on YouTube. I do injury analysis on NFL players that are pertinent to the fantasy football season. And this is going to be my rundown of the top 50 wide receivers and the injury concerns I may or may not have with them, whether or not I think they're a good value. So let's get right into it. Let's start with Ja'Marr Chase. Ja'Marr Chase hasn't had any kind of injury issues in the offseason or last season. He missed 0 games last season, and he finished as a final positional ranking of number 1. I don't have any concerns about him going into the season, and I think he'd be a great first overall pick. Next up, we have Justin Jefferson, and Justin Jefferson has had a couple of other issues going on in this preseason. So last season, good news is that he didn't miss any games. The issue with him is that he did have a hamstring injury 2 seasons ago, and that caused him to miss multiple games. He went on IR, and then this preseason, he ended up having another hamstring injury. So with that, they said specifically that it was the opposite hamstring. So overall there, that's a good sign that it wasn't a re-aggravation of a previously injured hamstring. And then he is a veteran, so we don't really worry that much about him missing significant practice as long as he's able to get back out there at some point in time. The news there is that we did hear that he got back out on the practice field and he has returned back. So I wouldn't be super worried about Justin Jefferson. Next up, we have CeeDee Lamb. And CeeDee Lamb overall is someone that has had a couple of nicked up injuries. So last season, he had a right AC joint sprain and he missed 2 games. Overall, AC joint injuries aren't something that would be a concern for me to get re-aggravated or anything like that across different seasons. So I wouldn't be overly concerned about him. Another positive is that he has not had any kind of issues returning back to practice. In this preseason, he hasn't had any kind of injury concerns there. Puka Nacua. So Puka, he's had a little bit of injury history. So he ended up having a posterior cruciate ligament injury last season, and he missed 5 games due to that. So that's a little bit of a concern, but once again, the posterior cruciate ligament is not something that tends to have a lingering effects, and it rarely requires surgery. In Puka's case, he did not require surgery. One of the concerns that I have with Puka Nacua is that he has questionable quarterback play in terms of Matt Stafford's risk. So Matt Stafford's back has been flared up all preseason. He's required an epidural injection, and then they recently had some news on him that they got a rejuvenation chamber, which was good news for me. Because initially, without any kind of way to control his back pain, the epidural hadn't allowed him to return back to practice. I was getting concerned that Puka Nacua would be without Matt Stafford. And then the backups are Jimmy G and Stetson. So not great options. But with the Rams having this rejuvenation trailer, which costs a cool $160,000, Stafford's able to get these treatments right before every game, throughout the season, during practices, and they use PEMF, or electromagnetic field therapy, red light therapy, and nasal cannula hydrogen, among other treatments, to help reduce pain in the short term. So as long as Stafford's able to rip these treatments whenever he wants, I have faith that he's going to suit up. He's an Iron Man. He rarely misses games. And with Stafford behind the helm, I think Puka's got great top possible over wide receiver 1 upside. So Puka has also not had any kind of injuries in this preseason, and there's been no worries there. So I would feel confident with Puka at that 4 number. Malik Nabers, he's our number 5, and he's had a bunch of stuff come up in this preseason. So last season, Malik Nabers missed 2 games, and that was due to a concussion. He also had reports of this turf toe, which he didn't miss any kind of games for, and he's had this turf toe injury since college. So when we're talking about a college injury with turf toe is typically a high risk for aggravation and a high risk for missing games. But with him being a rookie wide receiver, he missed no games for that last season, so that's a positive there. Now, what's happening this preseason? So Malik Nabers reportedly has had load management practices for turf toe, but he also had a shoulder injury, which he took a hard hit to AC joint sprain, and then he ended up not really missing any practice reportedly for that, but then missed 11 days of practice. They said it wasn't due to the turf toe specifically. That was Jordan Renan for the Big Blue podcast, who follows the Giants pretty closely. And then they ended up saying that it was due to back tightness. So back tightness, that seems kind of a cop-out reason. Back tightness shouldn't hold a player out from 11 practices. or 11 days of practices, but there is also reports that Malik Neighbors just is kind of anti-practice, so he doesn't really like getting out there. He's a stud wide receiver. They don't really pressure him to. So with that being said, I have a mild injury concern listed for Malik Neighbors. So with that being said, he's a great wide receiver. I think he should be a viable wide receiver one for you. But with him having the chronic turf toe, there is a chance that that could flare up, cause him to miss some games. The more he plays on it, there has been mention of surgery being a possibility at some point in time. So there is a slight risk of him aggravating that turf toe to the degree where it becomes a serious issue. What kind of risk is that? So mild for me means that you drop him about half a round from his ADP. So he's at the wide receiver 5 right now, so you knock him down a couple spots from there. So let's talk a little bit more about the next player on our list, Amon-Ra St. Brown. So I'm a Lions fan, so this is a player that I always love watching. I'm good with taking him. I do have some concerns about his usage in this offense. I think Jamo is going to take a little bit higher of a target share load. I also think Laporta is going to step up a bit. Amon-Ra is a great PPR monster, and I don't really have any injury concerns for him. He had a knee bruise last season. He didn't miss any games. He ended up finishing positional ranking wise as the number 3 wide receiver, which is amazing. And then in this preseason, he hasn't had any kind of issues. He did have a cleanup procedure in the knee in the offseason. We can talk a little bit about what that might have been. So when you have possibly like an MCL injury, or you have maybe a little bit of mild degenerative changes in your knee, sometimes there's a loose body in there, or maybe like a fraying of a meniscus or something like that. So if you're having a little bit of knee discomfort, they do an MRI. If they see something in there that might be a little bit out of place, they can just go in and snip it out or remove that loose body. Just hypothesizing here, but overall, it doesn't seem like it was any kind of major issue. And I'm okay with him at that number 6 spot, right around him and Nico Collins, Brian Thomas Jr. I think I might take Nico or Brian Thomas Jr. over Amon-Ra just because of the situation and the target share, but that would be the lowest that I would drop him. Aside from that, next up we have Nico Collins. And Nico Collins, he finished as the positional ranking of 26th. The reasoning for that is because he had that hamstring injury. The hamstring injury cost him 5 games last season, so quite a bit of time. Obviously, a little bit of concern about if that's going to linger over season. If you follow my Instagram or my TikTok, I go over hamstring injuries in depth, and the reason why hamstring injuries take so long to recover from is because they span 2 joints. The bicep femoris, the most commonly injured our hamstring muscle, has a dual innervation, and wide receivers are especially at risk for it because of that sprinting function. The hamstring typically gets injured during the eccentric or the lengthening phase of that muscle during a sprint, and wide receivers, they got to start sprinting right when that play begins, unlike running backs, linemen, quarterbacks, all that. Wide receivers, they're the ones that hit it with a sprint. So with that being said, there's not really an increased risk from season to season, and Nico Collins hasn't had any issues in this preseason. He also doesn't have Tank Dell in this offense, unfortunately, because Tank Dell had a very severe knee injury last season, and he's not going to be playing this season. So with that being said, Nico Collins should command a bigger target share, and that's good news for him. So that's why I'd be taking him over Amon-Ra St. Brown in this position. Next up, we have Brian Thomas. And he was a beast, man. He had a chest injury last season. He didn't miss any time at all, and he finished as the wide receiver 4. So really good news. In this preseason, he had a shoulder bruise in camp, but hasn't really cost him any time or anything like that. Overall, Brian Thomas Jr. also is in a really good position in that offense, and I would expect him to take another step forward. So that's why Nico Collins, I still like over ASRB. Next up, though, we have A.J. Brown. And this is someone that I wouldn't take over Amon-Ra St. Brown. I like him better. And that's because A.J. Brown is a little bit older, and he missed 4 games last season. He had a left hamstring injury. He had a knee sprain. He also, this preseason, has another hamstring. We don't really know which side it's on. So another hamstring injury is pretty concerning to me. Like I said before, the older you get, the harder it is to recover from them. And he is out there running, so it shows that he is somewhat close to return. But overall, I would have a mild concern on him, and I'd drop him about half a round. He also had this history of cartilage surgery, and they said that they were draining his knee pretty constantly at the end of last season. So all around, not great. Still want him on my team at Next up, we have Vlad McConkey, who I actually love. He's had a really good season in that Chargers offense. Last year's a rookie, he ended up only missing one game, and he had a shoulder and a knee sprain. Typically, those would result in at least one missed game apiece, so the fact that he only missed one game total is a positive indication for his durability and all that. So even with missing that one game, he still finishes the wide receiver 12, which means that he was putting up a decent amount of points. How's he looking this season? We like to see wide receivers take a jump in that second season, and he hasn't had any kind of significant injury history. He had his thigh wrapped and he missed a couple practices, so it seems like he had a simple groin strain that wasn't really bothering him too much, and I really like him at this position. I would probably take him over A.J. Brown at this point in time. So he would be the wide receiver 8 or 9-ish region. Next player I also love, Drake London. I think Drake London has the possibility to significantly outperform his ADP. So he's right around that 10 or 11 ranking. And he is in a great offense. He came on very strong last year with the addition of the new quarterback, Penix. So we'll see how he performs this year. But injury concern-wise, let's see here. He ended up having a hamstring injury last season, and he also ended up having, let's see here, a hip sprain. How many games did he miss for that? Usually hamstring injuries last for a couple weeks, but he didn't miss any games last season. So that's amazing. And then he ended up finishing as a top 10 wide receiver. I expect him to outperform that ADP. So another player I would also take above A.J. Brown. And probably Amon-Ra St. Brown as well. So after that, next player that I'm going to cover is T. Higgins. T. Higgins, man, he's always injured, but when he plays, he puts up monster points. So kind of a high risk, high reward situation there. He had a hamstring injury last season, and he had a quad injury last season, and he missed 5 games. That's right around, honestly, what I would expect the average time missed is for those games, but he has a history of soft tissue injuries, so I would put him on a high injury concern. And when I say high, I would actually grade him out to be so I would drop him about half a round to 1 round from where his ADP is. So right now, he's around the 26th player drafted, so drop him down to 30 to 35 and see where we're going from there. Aside from that, Tyreek Hill. So Tyreek Hill had a scapholunate injury last season, and I think that really affected him. So scapholunate ligament is in between these carpal bones in the hand, and they can affect grip strength. They can affect just receiving ability in general. You can imagine if you're having pain right in the center of that hand, and it's going to affect your grip strength, then you're not going to catch as many balls. So he's still got the speed. He still has Tua as his quarterback, and when Tua is healthy and Tyreek is healthy, then they're a decent duo. With Tyreek, he ended up missing no games last season, but because of that injury, he still only finished as the wide receiver 18, combined with the fact that Tua missed a bunch of games, and when Tua wasn't playing, Tyreek was just bad. So when we're looking at this, Tua's had some preseason stuff. He had an off-season screw removal, and then he had a preseason oblique. He still hasn't returned back to practice, so we have to take that into account. He's another player that I would assign a mild injury grade to, and I would drop him about half a round to a round as well from his ADP. And when I say that I would assign this injury concern, where with mild, I'm dropping them half a round to 1 round, with moderate, I'm dropping them 1 to 3 rounds, and severe, I'm dropping them more than 3 rounds, and do not draft them, obviously, and do not draft. I know these players likely aren't going to be there 3 rounds afterwards. It's just the range that I'm saying that would make it worthwhile for me. So, I mean, when I'm saying don't draft this player unless they drop 3 rounds past their ADP, it's pretty much me saying I probably wouldn't draft them. After that, we're going to shift over to Davante Adams. Davante Adams is in a new offense. He's over there with Matt Stafford, who I went over my concerns with before, but I do have reduced concerns about Matt Stafford being able to make it through the season now. And I think Davante Adams, where he's going, is honestly a pretty good sleeper pick, where he's going to outperform his ADP, in my opinion. So he's being drafted at the wide receiver 14. I think he's got a shot to be a top 10 wide receiver. Last season, he did not do that well. He ended up as the wide receiver 14. He ended up missing 3 games due to a hamstring injury. But this season, I think he's going to kind of want to prove himself. I do think that I would draft him reasonably at that overall ADP 30 spot or at that wide receiver 14 spot. Next, we have Jackson Smith-Jigba, who I think will be a decent player injury-wise. Like, I'm not really concerned about his injury concern. He didn't miss any games last season. He finishes as a wide receiver 7, all good things, and we didn't hear about any kind of injuries in the preseason or anything like that. So the only issue with him is a lot of people are projecting the entire Seahawks offense to take some regression backwards. Not really sure about the quarterback play. Sam Darnold could be an upgrade. He couldn't be an upgrade. I'd rather go with these next wide receivers over Jackson, though, but injury concern-wise, I don't really have any concerns about him. So the next player that we have up here is Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson was a stud last season. He didn't miss any games. He didn't have any injury concerns. He finishes with wide receiver 9. That was as a rookie. I expect that he should take a step forward. Also, quarterback play with Fields. We'll have to see what happens, but I do think that Fields can make Wilson stay as a high-level relevant wide receiver, and Wilson has the talent threshold to keep himself up there as well. So let's go on next to Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin, he's got supposedly a hamstring injury, but we don't really know if that's a real hamstring injury or if that's just contract dispute. He didn't miss any games last season. He finishes a wide receiver 8. Assuming that he comes up with a new contract, he's happy. I think he's going to be a great wide receiver for you. Could be a steal at the range that he's going, but we won't know until he signs that contract. Aside from that, we got Marvin Harrison Jr. Marvin Harrison Jr. was a little bit of a disappointment last season. He did have a concussion that he didn't miss any time for, which was kind of insane, well under the average there. But he also finished as the wide receiver 34. So do we think that Kyler's going to put on a better performance this season? I don't know. He doesn't have any kind of injury concerns for me this season. So injury-wise, I have assigned him a green flag on that. But yeah, we don't know how he's going to perform this season. So aside from that, next up we have, let's see here, Mike Evans. Mike Evans, man, I'm pretty high on him, mainly because one of the other wide receivers here, Chris Godwin, had an ankle dislocation. And those ankle dislocations are pretty severe. They typically affect career trajectories. So I think Mike Evans and their new rookie are going to be the only viable targets in this offense. So I like Evans where he's going. He did have a hamstring injury last season. He ended up missing 3 games for it. But this preseason, he's had no injury concerns. Like I said before, he's been a warrior for this Bucs offense. He's put up reliable numbers every single year, and I think he should be a great wide receiver too for you at his projected range right now. So last season he finished as a wide receiver 13. I think that that's a reasonable projection for him this season, and this season he's going as a wide receiver 19. So I think there's a little bit of a discount there. Outside of that, we have DJ Moore. So DJ Moore, I also think should be possibly a little bit of a sleeper. I think that Caleb Williams takes a huge step forward, and injury concerns wise, we don't have any injury concerns for DJ Moore. He didn't miss any games last season. He finished as the wide receiver 17, and right now currently he's going at the wide receiver 20. No injury concerns for him. Perceived upgrade with Caleb Williams understanding this offense a little bit better. So we'll see what happens there. Next up, we have DK Metcalf, and I have some concerns about him. So he had an MCL injury last season. He missed 2 games for it, well around the average range for that kind of injury, but he finished as the wide receiver 35. So that's not great. Now he's in the Pittsburgh offense. He's got Aaron Rodgers as quarterback, older Aaron Rodgers, not quite the Aaron Rodgers of old, and then they don't have Pickens. So they don't have anyone to take any of the attention off of Metcalf. With that being said, he hasn't had any kind of injury concerns in the preseason, so injury-wise, I don't really have any kind of real concerns about it, but I would just proceed with caution with him. Xavier Worthy is the next guy up. He's in that Chiefs offense. He had a concussion last season that he didn't miss any time from. There's not really any kind of concerns for me there. I do think that's a crowded offense, and I'd be worried about him getting enough looks. In addition, the staff removed the concussion diagnosis, so that's mildly concerning because it's just like, why did you diagnose him with a concussion in the first place and then remove it? So we'll see what happens there, but no real injury concerns aside from that. Lastly, we have Courtland Sutton, and Courtland Sutton, he had no injury concerns last season. He finished as a wide receiver 15, which is great. And in this season, he has no injury concerns. So I feel confident drafting him where he's going. Let's keep going. Next up is Rashee Rice. He was off to a great start last season, but he ended up finishing as a wide receiver 97. Why is that? It's because he had a PCL or PLC, a posterior lateral corner injury, not an ACL, but an injury to basically two or three ligaments at the back right corner of that knee that required surgical repair. Another thing that's weighing on him, so he missed about 12 games last season, the remainder of the season after that injury. This season, he also had a groin injury in the preseason. So he's got to recover back from that surgery. Before any of the other suspension talks came aside, I just had a mild injury concern for him. And obviously, injury wise, that's kind of the only rating that I'm going to provide perspective on. I will say that there's an upcoming suspension happening, and it's unclear what part of the season it's going to be in. So I would just assign probably a moderate rating overall to him. It seems like there's a lot of uncertainty overall. He was going around that pick 50 range, so probably drop him about 15, 20 picks from there and see what happens. Next up, we have Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley seems like he's a great candidate to be a sleeper, so he hasn't had any kind of really significant injury history. He had a minor shoulder foot injury last season, but he didn't miss any time from it. And aside from that, this season he hasn't had any kind of injury concerns. Cam Ward seems like he's lighting it up in the preseason, and it could be a great QB for Ridley to just take off from this season. So I do have a sleeper grade assigned to Ridley. He's currently around that 63 pick range, and he's rated around the wide receiver 26. Last season, he was wide receiver 39. So like I said, I think he's got a lot of upside this season. Next up, we have Devontae Smith. And Devontae Smith last season, he had a couple injuries. He had a concussion and he had a hamstring injury. He ended up missing about 3 games for that, which overall is less than I would expect from a concussion and a hamstring. Hamstrings usually knock players out for 2 to 4 weeks, and concussions are usually 1 to 2 weeks. So he's a little bit on the improved side of that. This preseason, he's had some back tightness, and he returned back to practice, which is great. He finished as the wide receiver 24 last season. I think he's being appropriately valued right now around wide receiver 27. I do think that A.J. Brown, is wide receiver 1 there. So Devontae Smith is being fairly valued at this point in time. A lot of people are both very high and very low on Jalen Waddle. It's understandable. He has had all the hype these past couple of years and hasn't really been able to capitalize it. Last year he had a knee sprain, most likely that MCL ligament or the inside part of that knee that usually involves about a 1 to 3 week absence, and he missed about 2 games for it. 2 games. He finished as the wide receiver 48 last season. Not great. And this season he's had no injury concerns. So we have Jalen Waddle in that offense. We have Tyreek Hill in that offense. You got to wonder about Tua's health. Tua's had a ton of concussions, unfortunately, and he continues to play. But if he ends up going through another concussion, you got to expect that's going to be a multi-week absence for him. So I think that Jalen Waddle being valued at the wide receiver 28 honestly might be a little bit high for him, just because I think there's a lot of other factors involved, but reasonable if there's no one else in that range. Next up, we have Jameson Williams. All my Lions, gotta love him. I think he's going to take another step forward this season. He ended up missing 2 games last season. That was due to gambling, not injury. And he doesn't have any kind of injury concerns this season. Even with those 2 games missed, he ended up being the wide receiver 23. And I do think he takes an increased amount of that target share this season with Goff slinging another year of comfort with him. Another reason why I'm a little bit lower on Amon-Ra. After Jameson Williams, we have Jerry Jeudy. And Jerry Jeudy had no injury concerns last season. He didn't miss any games, and he finished as the wide receiver 11. I think that he is a great mid-round pick, and he's got a chance to do better than his current pick of 68, and he currently has a wide receiver grade of 30. So that's pretty low considering he finished 11th at his position last season. I think there's some concerns about QB play, but he is a veteran wide receiver right now and should be able to hopefully surpass that. Next up, we have Terrell McMillan, and I have some concerns about him. So he's a rookie wide receiver, and he's already had 2 hamstring aggravations. So he had 1 in the beginning of August, and then he had just 1 a couple days ago. So when we're talking about rookie wide receivers that are having multiple hamstring aggravations in the same preseason, we get concerned about how they're going to acclimate initially to the rigors of the NFL. Dynasty-wise, this isn't really concerning me for him, but I am concerned about the risk of aggravation in season because once you've had a hamstring injury within the first 4 to 5 weeks, you have about a 20% risk of aggravating it again. He already had that aggravation. So he is the only wide receiver in that Panthers offense. I know Leggett has had about 84 receptions last season, so he might take a little bit of a step forward, but they drafted Terrell McMillan for a reason. So he does have upside, but his injury concern right now is bothering me, and I would rate him at a mild, moderate injury concern for that. After Terrell McMillan, we have George Pickens, and I love Pickens. Even though with CeeDee Lamb without offense, there is going to be targets and rooms for Pickens. He had a hamstring injury. He missed 3 games, a little bit concerning. Finishes the wide receiver at 39, but this preseason he's had no concerns, and I do think that his skill level and talent level will get him targets, and I do think that'll work positively for Lamb as well. And I think that we could have a pair of 1,000-yard wide receivers on it. So where Pickens is going right now is the wide receiver at 32. I think that's great value because I think he's going to far exceed that in the upcoming season. After Pickens, we got Travis Hunter. He has a soft tissue injury already, and I am a little bit concerned because he's planning on playing 2 ways. And even if that doesn't work out, if he's doing that for the first part of the season, that's going to hurt his fantasy potential. So I would say that I probably wouldn't be targeting him. I do have a injury concern on him just because he already has a soft tissue injury. He's planning on playing both ways. So even at his ADP of wide receiver 32, I probably would take these other players over him. Aside from that, we have coming up next, sorry, I'm just trying to go through this list, Chris Olave. Chris Olave has such a good skill level, but he is a huge injury risk because of his concussion history. So he has 8 games missed last season due to concussion. He's had multiple concussions throughout his NFL career, and he has no injury concerns this preseason, but you got to really, really be careful drafting him. He's got a great upside at wide receiver 34, but like Tua, if he ends up getting a concussion, it'll be a multi-week absence at minimum. After that, we have Rome Odunze, and we'll follow up in a second. He's a second-year wide receiver, 1 more season with Caleb Williams. Not any kind of injury concerns last season, which is great. And he had an MCL injury, which he didn't miss time for. And then aside from that, he doesn't have any preseason injury concerns. So decent value at this point in time. I do get concerned that if Caleb can support 2 wide receivers, so we'll see about that. Next up, we have Jacoby Myers, who I love. I think that he is a target hog. He was going at wide receiver 29 last season. He missed 1 game. That was due to a high ankle sprain. He missed less time than average is for a high ankle sprain. Usually those take about 3 to 4 weeks, to be honest. He doesn't have any injury concerns this preseason, so I like him a lot as a sleeper to outperform his ADP. Another player I love is Stephon Diggs. He had an ACL injury last season, unfortunately, but it was early in the season, and it was an isolated ACL, meaning that there wasn't a meniscus injury or anything like that. It was a clean tear. He has been lighting up camp. He might miss this first season game, so even if you hear that he might be out, not able to return, I do like him for a late season surge in which he could possibly carry your team to the championship. So Stephon Diggs is someone that I'm targeting. He finished at the wide receiver 65 last season because of that ACL, but we'll see what happens. Chris Godwin, someone that I'm not targeting at all. So he had an ankle dislocation along with a fibula fracture. He had a high ankle ligament tear. Ankle dislocations are career-altering injuries, and it sounds like he's got a chance at starting the season on the PUP. I'm not targeting Chris Godwin. Doesn't really matter where he's available. Khalil Shakir, he had a high ankle sprain last season that he only missed 1 game for. That's great news. He has another high ankle sprain this season. Not great news. It sounds like it's the same ankle as last season. He's ready, expected to be ready for week 1. So where he's going right now, wide receiver 39, that's fine, but just know that he's a high injury risk for that high ankle, so I'm probably taking these other players I talked about over him. Matthew Golden, I think, is going to be a stud that Green Bay Packers haven't taken a wide receiver in the first round in like over 10 years, and Jaden Reed's injured right now. So I do like Jaden Reed and Matthew Golden, but Golden is the player to grab, I feel. Juwan Jennings, sorry if I butchered his name. He had a hip pointer last season. He missed 2 games for it. He finished as wide receiver 25. This season, he's involved in a contract dispute. He had reportedly a calf strain that was aggravated when he tried to practice it. So we don't know if that's contract talk or if he actually had a calf strain. If he did have a calf strain, that lowers him in my rankings. I don't want him as wide receiver to own in the San Francisco offense. I want Ricky Pearsall. Ricky Pearsall seems to have been lighting it up in camp. He had a gunshot wound prior to last season that ended up having him miss 6 games. So he took an acclimation period to come in. He finishes as a wide receiver 93. This season he had some hamstring tightness, but he returned back to practice very soon. And we've already talked about if you have a hamstring injury, you want to rest it as much as possible. So the fact that he returned back in the preseason after only a short absence grades pretty well for that hamstring. And aside from that, yeah, Juwan Jennings, I would kind of slide down my rankings because of that. So also I think that Kittle and CMC are the real players to own there. So that's another reason why I'm not pursuing Jennings super highly. Jordan Addison, he ended up getting suspended for 3 games for that off the field issue. And he had an ankle sprain last season, high ankle sprain that he ended up missing 2 games for. He finished as a wide receiver 20. So with that being said, he is being drafted at the wide receiver 42 position, which I think fairly values where his with the games missed and with him not having really any kind of injury issues in the preseason and him having a pretty high ceiling. Obviously, he's got Jettas going across from him, but I think that just opens up targets for him. Deebo Samuel. So Deebo was a beast last season. He ended up missing a bunch of games because he had pneumonia. No, he didn't miss a bunch of games, sorry. He missed very few games, but he had pneumonia and he didn't perform very well in the games that he played in. And I honestly think it's because he returned so quickly. He had pulmonary edema or fluid on his lungs, secondary to pneumonia or lung infection, and he played that same week. So that's cool. That's like really awesome that he did that, but his respiratory status was definitely limited. So it makes sense that he wasn't able to probably hit the speeds that he's normally able to hit, and he was probably getting winded, so resulting in poor performance. So I do think that he is a decent bounce back candidate for this upcoming season, going at the wide receiver 43 ranking. I think that he should be able to outperform that pretty easily. Next up, we have Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp is someone that I'm not unfortunately super high on. So he's a little bit older. He's in a new offense now. He had a high ankle sprain last season where he ended up missing 5 games for it. He finishes the wide receiver 36. This preseason, he's not having any kind of real injury concerns or talks about any kind of injury suffered there. I do have just a mild injury grade on him, even at that wide receiver 44 position. So meaning I'll drop him about half a round to a round from where he's going. Aside from that, I already talked about Ricky Pearsall. I like him a lot. I think that he is the wide receiver to own in this offense. He's the one getting the reps, and he doesn't really have any kind of injury concerns that we know of. So yeah, all aboard that train. Let's talk about Keon Coleman. Keon Coleman didn't missed about 2 games last season. He had an unspecified hand injury. This season, there's a lot of mouths to feed in that Bills offense, but I do think that he has some sleeper value. He is great red zone target, and if he can start picking up some looks in the slot, then he should provide you with some flex or even back-end wide receiver 2 value. So I do like Keon Coleman. Emeka Egbuka is definitely the sleeper on everyone's list for the Bucs offense because Godwin, like we said, is not really up to speed, and Evans is a little bit older, and he already had a little bit of a hamstring strain in this preseason. So Muka, everyone's targeting him. He's probably shooting up draft boards, but I think that if you can get him, he's someone who you should definitely go a little bit higher than his value at. He's ranked at the wide receiver 47, but he's definitely going higher than that currently. So you might have to reach a little bit on him, and I do think he's someone who is worth the reach. Jane Reed, we already talked about. He's got some sort of foot sprain. So foot sprains are kind of concerning, but they called him day-to-day, and they said that they hope that he's ready for week 1, but that basically means he's week to week. With that being said, when you talk about foot sprains, people get worried about something called a lisp frank sprain, and that's the middle part of the middle inside part of the foot. That first long bone, it's a very kind of sensitive area, and that can be a months-long injury. So the fact that they're calling them days to weeks means it's not a lisp frank. Probably means it's one of those little ligaments in between the foot, and I wouldn't be overly concerned about it. I do think he's at risk for missing, week 1, week 2 possibly, but Jaden Reed has had really good stats these past 2 seasons, and although Golden is, they draft him for a reason, I do think Jordan Love can support two wide receivers in that offense, and Jaden Reed has been a very consistent target for Jordan Love. So I do like Jaden Reed, and I think that he should be on your list. Let's finish off with Rashid Shaheed. He had a meniscus repair last season. A meniscus repair is different than meniscectomy. So a meniscectomy just means you clip the meniscus. These players can return back pretty quickly, as we've seen with Dickerson and the offensive lineman that suffered that meniscus injury. Meniscus repair, that's a season-ending injury, but it's preferable if you're able to do it, because with meniscus repairs, you optimize the amount of space that the meniscus is protecting the bone from the bone and reduce the onset of arthritis that comes early on. So he had a season ended early, but he should be healthy, and he doesn't have any kind of injury concerns in the preseason. Possible sleeper, but that offense is not very high powered. So I'm okay with taking him. I won't be super excited with him on my squad, but I won't be super sad. He should return back in flex numbers, I would say. That is all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed this wide receiver ranking. I will try and get a running back one out as well this week. All right, take care, guys. Follow me on Fantasy Docs on Instagram and TikTok if you don't already, and subscribe here.